It's time for the Double Stop with Brian Sword.
Welcome to the Double Stop Podcast. I'm Brian Sword, and this is the theme song to Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Not something I ever thought I'd be playing on the show. It was written by Paul Taylor, this week's guest, but you also know him from Winger, specifically as the writer of their biggest hit, Miles Away. This song is a good example of the other musical projects musicians have to do to make a living. And as Paul says, this is just one of many for him. This week is the story of Paul Taylor, a songwriter who you've probably heard much more than you realize.
Well, right outside the San Francisco area, a little town called Lafayette, I was born and grew up till junior high. And, it's literally about 10 minutes or 15 minutes out of San Francisco. And then starting in junior high, moved up to the wine country, Napa Valley, Sonoma County and all that. So, and my parents we moved out into a house out in the mountains. And I didn't drive yet, of course. So I was kind of stuck out in the mountains, which probably added to why I played as much as I did, because I really had nothing else to do up there,
And what was the first instrument you picked up?
It was actually piano. I was playing piano starting from when I was about 5. We had a piano in the house, and it was one of those things I used to sit down at, and before I'd taken any lessons or anything, and I slowly just started picking out songs on it. My parents were like, God, he's got an ear on him. So at one point they put me in lessons for about a year, and at that point. One day I see this car pull up, and it's this old beat up car with a bunch of stuff piled on it. And this couple comes in, and I'm like, who's this? And my mom goes, well, it's your cousin Kathy. And she's married to this guy named Joe, which ended up being Country Joe and the Fish. And they ended up living with us for a year. And Joe played acoustic guitar at the time. This was before he'd put Country Joe and the Fish together. And if you know who they are, I mean, they played Woodstock and all that.
Yeah.
But Joe was just playing acoustic songs at the time, and I was, kind of a, hyper kid and just didn't want to sit and practice piano an hour a day and all that. And so I was like, hey, I want to play guitar like Uncle Joe, So they didn't force me to keep with the piano, and they bought me a cheap Westbrook guitar, and I just started playing guitar and kind of pretty much dropped piano all the way up until about the last year of high school, or second to the last year of high school. I took a class where you could study any instrument you wanted. And I mean, I would sit and play it sometimes because by ear, I could play piano kind of. And, and I had taken a little bit of lessons. And so I would play it and I would write song ideas on it. But in junior high, I'd been starting to play in bands, and we were always looking for a keyboard player in my town. And by default, me and my other friend that played guitar, we both kind of were playing a little bit in bands just because no one else could do it. And so I went to study this last time, and I was going to take violin, and about 3 weeks into it, I couldn't even squeak a noise out of the thing. So I went to the teacher and just said, hey, I used to play piano a bit, and they had all these piano rooms there. And I said, can I just switch for the year to piano? And he's like, sure. So during that year, I kind of got really back into it and started writing a lot. And that's how it all happened. And it was the best move. The fact that I play both piano and guitar pretty equally and can sing some okay backups is really the reason that I've gotten all the gigs I've gotten, because God knows there's a million guitar players, but the fact that I was always able to jump off and play some keys was really the reason that I've gotten most of the gigs.
And did you have any vocal training back then too, or did you just sing?
I did. I took vocal lessons several times. And I mean, I can sing. My pitch is really good, and, I'm really good at blending, and I definitely am great at harmonies. I can hear them real well, but I just don't have the best voice, I don't, in terms of singing on my own, I just kind of sound like Neil Young on a bad day or something, but I am a good background singer, that's like, with all the bands, especially like when I played with Steve Perry, there was a lot of singing, and you got to be able to sing if you're singing with somebody like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But as a matter of fact, during the time I was with him, he put the entire band into about 6 months of vocal training.
Oh, wow.
And it was amazing what this coach did with us. I mean, he got it where, he would get it where everybody was pronouncing the words the same and just kind of all the inflections. And he ended up making us sound like laser beams. I couldn't believe, at first I was thinking, oh, this is kind of dumb. But I was actually shocked with what he did with us.
So you're back in high school, you're reconfirmed, or maybe even for the first time, heavily into piano. Did you start switching over in terms of your bands? Now you're a piano player in your bands primarily?
Yeah, well, me and my buddies, we had this little band called Stark Raving Mad, and one day we were driving down this road, Steel Lane, and we see this garage open and this pile of keyboards in there, and this guy was in there working, and so I just stopped, and I walked up, and I'm like, oh my God, are you a keyboard player? And he, his name was Frank, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to be making a band, and I'm building a studio, and he had all these keyboards we've never seen before, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is our lucky day. Well, we started trying to jam with him, and it became apparent really quickly he could barely play, but he had all this amazing equipment, and he had a studio, and so we just said, hey, thanks, it was fun, but you're not quite as far along as we are, and so we're going to go. And he's like, no, just, you guys, you're amazing. You can have the studio and you can have the keyboards and I'll manage you guys, because he was super smart, So we were like, okay. So that's what we did. So we kind of started really putting a lot more keys into our sound. And, sometimes we'd kick bass pedals if we didn't have a bass player. And, it was kind of like Emerson, Lake and Palmer in a weird way, but, just on a small level. And we didn't ever go do anything huge. It was just, growing up type stuff and playing in your local, we'd play at the Veterans Memorial Building, and we'd do talent show or battle of the bands, and we'd win them. And, just the goofy stuff you do when you're a kid, Starting my junior year summer, I had been playing with a band called Destiny with a bunch of guys that had moved up from Beverly Hills that were going to Sonoma State University. And my dad was a professor there, and he came home with this card off the bulletin thing one day. It was like, band looking for guitar player, keyboard player. And he's like, man, these guys are from LA, you never know. And so I joined up with them, and it was a really amazing kind of band. It was kind of, the guitar player was named Dave Freshman. As a matter of fact, we're still in touch to this day. We're all still good buddies. And it was kind of like the Who meets Genesis or something. And so I joined up with them, and we started playing, around the area for a little bit. But then when summer hit, they were all moving back to Beverly Hills. And so they were like, man, you got to come down there and, play all these huge LA parties that we do. So I did. I moved down there, and I was kind of bouncing from house to house. They all had these huge houses in Beverly Hills, their parents. Yeah. And they each put me up for several weeks at a time. And so we did that for one summer. And then the next summer I went back, and at some point, and I'm foggy on all the timelines of it all then, but by then I had met this guy, John Golden, and he was partnered with Chris Nix, Stevie Nicks' brother, and they wanted to put some money into a project with me. And by then I had met Eric Martin from Mr. Big. Of course, he wasn't in Mr. Big back then. He was in a band called Kid Courage. And I'd heard him sing in San Francisco, and I was like, oh my God, I need to work with this singer. And so I got in touch with him, and I just told him, I said, hey, I've got these backers in LA. They want to finance me and blah, blah, blah. And so long story short, after, high school, I ended up moving down with a couple of the guys from Stark Raving Mad and Eric, and we all moved down, and we were all just down there for like a year and did a bunch of demos, and that kind of started the whole, thing. And I was kind of bouncing back and forth between LA and San Francisco. But none of that really kind of ended up becoming anything, but it was like shortly after that, probably a couple more years, when Aldo Nova ended up coming to San Francisco. And I don't remember why he just chose San Francisco to try and find a band, because he was from Montreal. But he did. And, of course, I knew I was pretty much into the Bay Area network by then. And so somebody said, hey, Aldo's looking for you. You got recommended by some people, and, he needs a keyboard player. So that's what I did. I went and auditioned for that, and that was kind of the start of all the whole, he had finished the record, but We went down to LA. I got the audition, and the next day we flew to LA and did videos for Fantasy and Ball and Chain, and that, and then we toured for a solid year. So that was my first kind of real induction into the pro world.
How was working with Aldo? I've had him on the show. He's an interesting guy.
Yeah, back then, we were all young and crazy. It was kind of tough, but I ran into him a lot of years later, and he apologized, and, he's like, yeah, I know I was a little crazy and hard to work with, and I was like, we were, when you're young like that, you think you're invincible, and you just think, everything best, and everybody else is an idiot, and so, we had a lot of fun, too, but he wasn't simple. Very opinionated and super talented. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, he had a vision, and he just didn't have the nicest way of going about finding it at the time, but like all of us, he's mellowed with age, and, so that's cool.
And how was that experience then on a big tour, which would have been your first real big tour?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, there was some tough stuff too, like the fact that we were traveling in station wagons. We didn't get a tour bus, and one of the tours we did was across Canada, January and February, driving around Canada in station wagons, opening for Street Heart.
So I guess from what I'm hearing, you finished a tour with Aldo, and it probably got a little rocky, and then you decided to move on.
Yeah, he decided that he wasn't going to put me on retainer, because me and him had a little spat at like about 3 weeks before it. I just felt like, I had taken enough of that. And, but then as it turns out, he called me a month later. He's like, hey, I've got another gig. So we talked, and I agreed to do that. And then, but meanwhile, I'd gotten a call from Nick Gilder. And so I went to LA and auditioned for Nick, and I got that gig. So I went and finished the gig with Aldo, and then that was that. We just kind of went different ways, and he went off to he was just taking a break. I mean, we had been touring a long time, and I think he was just going back to start trying to figure out, to write his second record. And I moved down to LA, and it's funny because I had just the week before, me and Jeff Pilson, that played in Doc, and then he's now in Foreigner. Me and him had been friends for a long time in the Bay Area, and we had always talked about, man, we should do a project sometime. And so we just met for coffee and said, hey, let's start writing. Let's do a project. And I was like, okay. And then it was literally like a few days later, he called me. He goes, dude, I'm so excited about what we were going to do, but I might have a gig for me and for you. He goes, Lita Ford is looking for a bass player, and Nick Gilder's looking for a keyboard player, and they're both in LA. So maybe we can move down there and keep writing. But, so we did, but of course we both got busy, and at one point too, though, it was funny because we were both down there working on these projects. We put a little cover band together because we had, both been off the road for a while. So we thought we'll make some money. So it was me and him and this girl Amy Cannon, who ended up becoming my girlfriend later, and that's who I ended up writing Miles Away about. But that was years later. But anyway, so we were playing in this club band. We were both doing our other gigs, and then Nick Gilder just kind of never got out of his garage. We recorded at Cherokee, did a demo, and then we couldn't get him to go out and play live. So, that's when I kind of was like, man, I got to figure out what to do here. So I went back to the Bay Area for a bit, and I played with Eric Martin again for a little while. And then I ended up getting a call from Alice Cooper people, which was about in late 85, I think. And so I went down, and they just said basically, hey, we got your name, and you were highly recommended. We don't have anyone else. So if you come down and you do halfway good, you get the gig. So I was like, well, that's pretty cool. So I went down there and played 18. Well, this funny story I tell is I was the first one down there because I wanted to make sure I was on time, and Alice, she was the one that showed up next, and he had his daughter with him, and they had been at the fair all day, and so his daughter had all this tinsel in her hair and stuff, and he comes walking up, and he's like, hey, are you the guy here to audition for Keys? I said, yeah, and he goes, oh, does your name start with a K? And I go, no, my name's Paul. And he goes, okay, good, because I don't want any more Ks. He goes, you got the gig.
Wow.
And I go, what? He goes, I've already got a Kip, a Ken, and a Kane. So anyway, but I played like, he goes, can you play 18? So we started playing 18, and halfway through he just stopped and he goes, you're it. You can play.
Oh, wow.
And I said, are you sure? I know a lot more songs. He goes, no, I can already tell you're the guy. So very easy audition, and it ended up just being a great gig for a lot of years. I mean, I played with Alice on and off for 13 years, and he was just awesome. I mean, just the nicest guy, and interesting and amazing storyteller, and just a lot of fun.
And what is it like? He's got such a reputation for just having a well put together organization.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, he's been doing it a long time, and he's very loyal to the people that have been there. So that's the thing, and that's always the key to something that runs smoothly, is when you just hang on to the team, and the more you keep changing stuff, the more room you have for error and surprises, and we thought this person was nice, but they're actually stealing from us, or awful, or
Yeah.
So no, it was a family thing, and even like way late in the game, they would still call and just go, hey, can you do it this year? And finally it was like 99, I think, when I finally just went, hey, I've been doing this a long time. Go give it to the younger guys, It's always fun to see him. I went to Knoxville and hung out with him about 3 years ago, and then I just saw him. He played at my friend's pub the other night.
Oh, wow.
A surprise show in Nashville, because his bass player lives here now, and we have this group of us that do this impromptu jam thing at my friend's club. It's called Dan McGinnis, and so a couple of his band guys have been down to jam at it, and it turns out that they were playing on the night that it happened, and so they had told Alice, hey, we're going to get the rest of the band. We're all going to go jam down at this club. It's really fun. It's on this outdoor thing, and you should come down. And he said, well, all right, let's do it.
Awesome.
So word kind of got out, and so it was great. I got to see Cheryl, his wife, and the band got there first, and they were jamming for a while. And by then it was 12:30 at night, because they had played with Motley earlier, and I thought, it's getting a little late. Maybe he bailed out. And all of a sudden I see this guy running across the parking lot. He just ran through behind the bar and just jumps up on his I'm like, oh
Awesome.
my God, there he is. He's like, let's rock. And they played a bunch of covers. They played My Generation and a bunch of, they played Hendrix, and it was great.
Oh,
and
that's
the place
awesome.
went nuts. And my buddy that owns the pub was just standing there going, I cannot believe this. He was just in shock.
Let's come back to Alice in the 80s. That would have been when you met Kip, right?
Yeah. I met Kip the first day, of course, but I didn't really, we were playing a lot, and I was like, hey, nice to meet all you guys. But I didn't have much time where I sat and talked to him. And then it was about the third day of rehearsal. I got there early again, and Kip was, of course, he was brand new too. He'd only been in the band a week.
Oh, yeah.
And he was sitting on the floor with this boombox, and he was playing some music, and I was listening to it, and because we were the first two guys there, and I was like, God, what is that? That's pretty cool. And he goes, some stuff I wrote. And I go, you're kidding me. I go, that's really cool, man. I go, who's singing? And he goes, me. And that's why I was like, that's your voice? I go, oh my God, you are an incredible singer, And so the next day I brought some stuff, and I go, hey dude, here's some stuff I wrote. It's kind of similar to, and so he was like, man, that's cool. We should write. And so that's what we did. We started off on tour, and we were just writing tunes as we went. Our first song was in Sioux City, Iowa. It was called State of Emergency. It was on our first Winger record. Not sure it's the greatest song, but it made the record somehow. And anyway, it was fun.
He left the band first, right? He left the band, but you stayed on. Is that how it went down?
Yeah, it was about we finished the tour that year, which we were out for probably at least a year solid. I mean, we were touring our buns off. And then we broke and did another record, Raise Your Fist and Yell, and we headed out on that one. And then it was probably halfway through that tour, we were going to have a break, and then we were going to go do Europe, I think. And Kip just came and just told me, he goes, hey man, I'm because me and Kip by then had been, we went to Boulder, Colorado at one point. His brother owned a studio, and me and Kip and Ken Mary, our drummer at the time, the three of us went there and recorded a bunch of demos. And then after that, Kip's like, man, I think I'm going to take these and try and get us signed. I think I'm going to quit, And I'm like, I was thinking in my head, gosh, I don't know if I would quit, because it's not simple getting a deal. But nevertheless, he did it, and 6 months later, we had a deal with Atlantic. So,
And that's when you left Alice to join the band?
yeah. Once the record was done, and because I was flying in and out, and they had met Rod while Kip and Reb were writing, in New York, and they met Rod in a studio, and he was like, God, I would love to play music like this, and they were of course huge Dregs fans, and so one thing led to another, and he called me. He's like, "You're not going to believe who we got on drums," and so it was funny. And and then when I did Europe, I toured Europe, and then I came back. I flew right to Hoboken, New Jersey, where Reb and Kip were, and we were living there and taking the Red Apple into Columbia Studios, and finished up the record. And that's when I met Rod for the first time, and it was like probably a month later that they put the record out and just got us on as opening act for Scorpions. So the very first show I ever played with Winger, or that Winger ever played together at all, was opening for like 13,000 people with Scorpions. So, nerve-wracking.
And how were the sessions for recording that record? I talked to Beau Hill, and he called Winger the most talented band he ever worked with.
Cool. Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it was very scattered. Everybody was in and out because of their schedules. And, at one point, I had to go. One time I was scheduled to go there, and then I had to go with Alice and record Under My Wheels with Axl. But yeah, everybody was kind of just bouncing in and out because of their schedules, and so it was a little discombobulated until the end. Then we were, once I flew back in, and we were there for the mixing and all that, but it was awesome, and of course, definitely some talent in the band.
Yeah.
Reb, and Rod and Kip. God, I mean, Kip is a genius. I mean, I don't know if you've got a chance to hear any of his classical stuff, or if you know that he's even doing that. But that whole thing, like with the San Francisco Ballet, and some of his pieces are unbelievable.
I've heard the 3 songs he's put on iTunes. Those I have. Yeah, and they're great.
Okay.
And how happy were you with that record?
Oh, I thought it was great. In my mind, I was like, this is totally going to go, and I mean, there's always a chance something won't, just because it doesn't, get the shot it deserves. And, at one point it almost died after they put it out. It was about a month in, I believe. They released the single and it started to fall, and Doug Morris got on the phone and just had a conference call with all the reps across the country. And they all just said, he was just screaming through the phone, I don't care what you have to do, get this thing to happen,
Oh, wow.
So they just went out on the streets and pushed it radio harder and all that, and, and turned it around. And all of a sudden it took, and then MTV picked it up, because they weren't picking it up because it didn't have high enough numbers yet. And then once they picked it up, the video shot right to the top, and the rest was history. But yeah, I mean, it could have just as well in that little time, if Doug hadn't seen something in us and just decided, hey, let him go. We would have could have been one of those bands you never would have heard of.
Now, in terms of the tour for that record, how much touring did you do?
It was a lot. We went out and God, I think we were out for like a year or a year plus, year and a half. I mean, if I remember correctly, and but it was an amazing year.
Yeah, it's Scorpions. Who else did you tour with?
God, I'm trying to think with Winger. I mean, it gets hard with me because I've toured with so many people now. I start getting all of it confused. We were out with Ozzy for a short time, and then one day Zach walked in and went, tour's over. And I mean, it was selling amazing. And we're like, what do you mean? And he's like, Ozzy's at the airport. He's going home. He says he's done. We're like, what? Typical Ozzy. Who else were we with that year? We were, of course, Cinderella. It was Winger, Bullet Boy, Cinderella. That was an amazing run. That was 2 months, and all of us had singles on the charts. And one of the great memories of my touring life. That it was just a couple months of a bunch of happy guys because we were all doing real well. So, and then we did one tour where we headlined some clubs with Extreme and Tangier opening. We just did some smaller stuff, clubs and theaters. God, who else? I mean, we were with Scorpions multiple times.
Now, for the writing sessions for In the Heart of the Young, you obviously have Miles Away on there, which you wrote like as a solo writer, and then you got a few
Yeah.
more writing credits peppered in. But tell me about overall the writing sessions for this record. How did you avoid the sophomore jinx and all that?
Well, I don't know if we did. As a matter of fact, at the point we handed the record in, because we had made a conscious effort to make the second record more progressive, because we just wanted to, we had some players that could pull some of that off, and we handed it in, and the label was like, no. They're like, where's 17? Where's, Madeleine? They go, this is too progressive, and, we'll put it out, but we're not going to push it. They said, we need some singles. So we went back, and that's where, Can't Get Enough and Easy Come, Easy Go and all that. We said, all right, I guess we better, because we were still pretty early in. It wasn't like, wow, okay, we're big enough now, we can tell the record company what to do. So we went back and tried to appease them and, get some commercial songs in there. And so they were happy. But we jammed a lot of it live. We set up at mates rehearsals, and we would just play each day, and, each guy would come in with just some riffs, and, Rev is like an endless reel of great riffs, and Kip always knows kind of what to do with them. So those two were a very strong writing pair. And, at the time, I just wasn't as prolific. But, at least I had things like Miles Away, which made it on that, of course, I had written by myself. And then it became a single, and ended up being our highest charting single. So, I guess I made up for it that way. But I didn't really care. As long as I had a shot to write, and they were open to it, and as long as the songs that made it were great, that's all I cared about. And I loved the stuff they were coming up with as well,
And what did it mean to you to have Miles Away make the record?
That was awesome. Initially when I wrote it, I was playing at the time in San Francisco. I was back up there, and I was playing with Eric Martin at the time, and so Eric actually sang the demo of it. Matter of fact, Kip made that announcement at our gig. I just played with Winger. Was it not last night, night before last, for our last show for the year. And I wasn't really slated to do that one, but since I had just learned all the songs because we just were in Japan, they were like, dude, you should come up and play Chicago with us. And I'm like, all right. So I just went up for fun. I just jumped in my car and drove up there with my keyboard and jumped up there and did the show. It was great too, because we had to learn a ton of songs for Japan because we did different shows there every night.
Oh, wow.
So we had a big arsenal of songs to pick from. And so it was the longest show we've ever played in the U.S. We played for over 2 hours, and there was a lot of fans that we know that follow us around, and they were all there, and they were just like, oh my God, that was the best show we've ever seen you guys all do. So it was fun.
What led you to do that in Japan?
Yeah, the reason was because we were just there in January, and so we did not want to go back, despite the fact, in January it was our 25th anniversary show, since we started the band. So we went over there, and we had told them, we're going to come over and we're going to play the first record front to back. Well, they ended up thinking that was really cool. So when they invited us back, they're like, now you come back and you can play the second record front to back. And so each night we had to do that. So, but we wanted them to know, because they can just jump on the bullet train. So we wanted to make it really clear to everybody that we weren't playing the first record again. We were playing the second one. And then past that, if they wanted to come to another town, just jump on the bullet train, they would see different songs on any different night they showed up. And so we were just trying to encourage sales, ticket sales, because we were just there 10 months before. So, and it worked. We had great turnouts. It went really well. But nevertheless, we were stuck playing that second record each night. So this time in Chicago, we didn't have to do that, and we knew tons of songs. So we just put together just a set of songs that we all wanted to play, and some that we knew no one had ever heard in the States before. And so they went nuts. They loved it.
That's fantastic. There's a lot of bands like I don't know, Pearl Jam does that do like the new sets every night. And the fans go crazy for it. And that's when you get the fans to start following night to night, show to show.
Yeah, I'm always for throwing out surprise stuff. Some guys really like to keep it and and it's harder that way, of course, and just some people in their comfort zone, they just like to get that set where it's just that same thing. And you definitely can, you definitely get a show where it becomes just, you're just on automatic pilot, which can be good. And sometimes it can kind of put you to sleep, but, it's just, everybody's different, Tom Keifer, like that I'm playing with now, he really likes to keep it kind of, unless he, has time to rehearse up a new, change of things. He likes to get it where and Alice is the same way, pretty much. It's like, get that show down and rehearse the heck out of it and go just do it the same every night. So everyone's different.
For sure. Now for In the Heart of the Young, it did very, very well again. And you had a big tour. I remember you toured with Kiss. I'm trying to think of what other big tours you were on. But you were on some big tours again. And you had a huge hit with Miles Away. And then you left the band. What happened there?
Me and Kip had just kind of like gotten to the point where like we had been 2 solid years in Alice Cooper, and between 4 and 5 with Winger, it was like no time apart. I mean, literally, they worked us to pieces. And I mean, those tours were just, long, and just, we were getting flown all over the place. And I mean, we were exhausted, and it just got to, we weren't fighting or anything. We would just look at each other, and we were just sick of each other. It was like we had spent so much time just glued at the hip. It was like, and just writing just didn't seem like it'd be fun. And, and to be honest, I was just getting burnt on the road. I was just like, by that time I had kind of taken up this interest in like possibly writing for TV. And I was starting to write a lot, by myself on the road and stuff. And I was just like, man, and fans at the time, I mean, our fans were young and, didn't really understand, privacy or being respectful, so we were getting kind of yanked around a lot by, young, crazy fan. I mean, like I remember one time we were just standing there talking to somebody, and this girl ran by, grabbed Kip's laminates and just jerked him off his neck. I mean, just almost took his head off. I mean, she just ran with him. Just crazy stuff like that, where I was going, and I was starting to get a little older, and I was going, man, I don't know, this has been fun, and I've got to a lot of countries, and, but I was just burnt out, and I just wanted to stop for a while. So I just decided, hey, we talked, and they decided they were going to go on, and I was just going to go write. As it turns out, 6 months later, they just called it a day. They were just like, dude, we're quitting. Because by then, the whole 90s thing was starting to happen, and, and we had seen it happening too. We were kind of taking it personally, but what we didn't realize at the time was the whole, the era was going down the tubes, kind of, and the Nirvana thing and the Seattle sound was starting to come in. But so anyway, I left, and within a couple months, ended up meeting with Steve Perry, and my intention was to try and write a couple songs with him. And the next thing I know, he was kind of thinking, hey, this is fun. Maybe we could start a band and do a solo record. So, and that's inevitably what happened.
And how did you hook up with him? How did you meet him?
Well, I was at a party. My friend Cindy used to work for Fan Asylum. She lives in San Francisco, and she had worked with the whole Journey camp forever. And so she was down in L.A., and my buddy was having a party in his art studio. And so I invited her, and so we were just hanging out and having a drink. And at some point, I just went, God, whatever happened to Steve Perry? Because, this had been 8 years since Journey. And she goes, God, it's really funny you should ask that. He was just talking about possibly starting something. And I'm like, you're kidding. And how you say stuff, but you think, so I was like, God, well, if he ever needs another Jonathan Cain, I play keys, I play guitar, I write, I could sing backups. And, and she's laughing, and, I think she probably said, oh yeah, well, let him know. And so literally the next morning at, I think 6:30 in the morning, I got a call from Steve going, hey, Cindy mentioned that, you might want to write, and I instantly knew it was his voice. And I'm like looking at my clock going, oh my God, it's 6:30 in the morning. He goes, hey, did I wake you up? I'm like, well, kind of. He goes, sorry, I get up real early. And, he goes, hey, what are you doing right now? And anyway, long story short, it was about half an hour later, he was standing in my kitchen drinking coffee with me, and we just talked for a long time, for a couple hours, and then, he said, "Hey, do you have anything you can play me?" And I just had all these nucleus little ideas I'd been recording on the road and stuff. And, of course, I was definitely Journey influenced because I grew up in the Bay Area and I was a huge Journey fan. So I had a couple ideas, one in particular that I just was like, oh, I know he's going to like this one idea I have. And sure enough, he had me play it over and over and over for literally, half the day. We were hanging out talking, and he'd have me play it again, and he would kind of just sing little things on it. And so that's how it started. And then it was months later that we ended up really, he kept, he was leaving town a lot, and I was in the midst trying to buy a house. And so I finally bought the new house and had switched my number and forgot to give him the new one. But he finally tracked me down. He's like, "Dude, what are you doing tomorrow at 9:00 in the morning?" I'm like, "Nothing." He's like, "Well, be down at Third Encore. Don't think you know what I want to do. Don't start learning Journey songs. Don't ask me any questions. Just bring your equipment." And so I went down, and he had just put together this little band of guys, this 18-year-old guitar player, Lincoln Brewster, who now has a huge Christian career. He's five records into his own career. And an amazing drummer. Well, it ended up being an amazing drummer. We went through a lot of bass players and drummer. Me, Lincoln, and Steve ended up playing forever. But the first day it was Terry Bozzio on drums for Missing Persons. And this bass player, Phil Bino from, I think he was from Boston. He ended up playing, I think, with Steve Vai for a while, and Lincoln on guitar and me on keys. And, we just started jamming. So we just set up on this big stage, and Steve said, "Go, just jam anything. I just want to see if I can still sing." And so I just kind of told Terry, "Hey, pound out a beat. I'll just play some keys, and Lincoln, just go ahead and rock out." And we just started playing a bunch of crazy ideas, and it was really fun. And, after doing that for weeks, he kept changing drummers and bass players around, and we finally ended up, getting this amazing drummer, Moise Lucas Jr., who had played with everybody from, Diana Ross, Jeffrey Osborne, to George Michael's on the Faith tour, to Kenny Loggins. And he was one of the last guys we auditioned, and he just came in and just knocked everybody out. He's definitely, so talented.
And if you look at the writing credits on the record you did, it's lists. Like it seemed like it really like the record was written as a group.
It was written live. We would just jam. It started from those jams we were doing, and then we kind of started numbering them. It's like, "Hey, what was that number 4 one that we had?" And, then I started recording them on my little boom box so we'd remember. And, things like "You Better Wait," which became the single, that song just kept morphing over 3 years. It kept growing. And, a couple times there was people we were auditioning in the room at the time. So like George Hawkins was playing bass on one of the days, and when he came up with something, and we just threw his name on there because, he was in the room, so we gave him a credit. But most of the stuff kind of was me and Lincoln and Steve writing.
And that initial idea you said that Steve really liked that you played in his house, did that idea make it onto the record?
Never made it. Never did anything more with it. Yeah, it's funny. He never asked about it again, and I don't think, I was just so freaked out. I was playing with him. I don't think I even remembered either until, like probably about 4 years ago, I was going through all my old DATs, and I found that song. I'm like, oh my God, this is what started it all.
Yeah. So that record you said it took 3 years from start to finish?
Well, we were together for 3 years, and, yeah, I mean, Steve likes to rewrite stuff. And, even down to the point where we were in the studio, he was changing some stuff. But, it took a long time to get that stuff done. And then we rehearsed for a really long time. And he, like I say, he put us in vocal lessons. But like bands would be next to us, like, we had Christopher Cross and Ozzy next to us for a while, and Van Halen, and, people would take off on tour and then come back and go, "Oh, you guys are back too, huh?" And we're like, "No, we never left. We're still rehearsing." And they're like, "What?" But anyway, once we finally got out, it was a blast. And then we toured for a couple months, and then Steve got really sick at the end of it with bronchitis and all that, and it just knocked him out completely. So we had to cancel, I think, the last 2.5 weeks of the tour. And then a week after that, we were supposed to go to Japan, I think, or And we were unable to do that as well because he just, he was feeling a little better, but every time he started to try and sing, he would just start coughing and coughing. And so he finally was just like, and it was like, I think a couple days before we were supposed to leave, and they were just like, no way he's going to pull this off. So, and that was it. I mean, he just decided to go into hiding again, and it wasn't until a little while later, and he did owe the label another Journey record, so he got involved in that, and so that was that. Just kind of one record and a tour, and really fun, and so glad I got to do it. I mean, people always ask me if there was one thing you could go back and do again, or one favorite thing. It was definitely that project. I mean, the band was stellar. I mean, it sounded like a record. The vocals were amazing, and we would just talk for hours, the five of us. I mean, we really had a lot of fun.
And have you seen the clips now that he's come out of hiding again and done a little bit of singing? Oh,
yeah. No, that's cool. It's good to hear him get out there and do it. I mean, I know he's out of practice and all that, but yeah, it's sad to me that he just doesn't always keep going,
Yeah, hopefully he'll resurface again now that maybe he got the itch back.
Yeah, you never know.
So what was your next move then after Steve Perry? Was it going back to Alice Cooper?
Well, I think I did. I don't remember the time frames of what years I was back with Alice. I mean, I know I ended with Steve, I think in 96. And then 97, 98, and 99, I got involved in writing a lot of stuff for music libraries and for TV.
Oh, okay.
I was cranking out songs for TV. And I also, and I think this was a little later, I think this was 2000, I ended up writing that main title for Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the theme song.
Oh, really?
Which ended up becoming that was my biggest hit ever. Because television, especially a main title, even though it was for Fox and not NBC or CBS, I mean, it was a lot of money. So, and fun, it's fun to write a theme song for a show. That was my dream. And my buddy Danny Lux, who's a big TV composer, he's the one that gave it to me. He was really swamped at the time, and he was doing the music for the show and just said, I do not have time to do this. So, if you want to take a shot at it, it's yours if you get it. And so I did, I owe him a lot for that. It was really gracious of him to give me the opportunity.
And what other shows did you do music for?
Well, I have music in a million shows, but I didn't do them for the shows. That one I wrote specifically with what they had told me in mind. And there's only been a couple other things that I've done like that. Most of the things I was just writing songs or just, music beds. But I mean, movies, I have stuff in like Pushington with Billy Bob Thornton. I had like The Forgotten with Julianne Moore. I did the music. I recorded All Along the Watchtower, Jimi Hendrix version for Chevy Chase's Las Vegas Vacation.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but TV shows I have a ton of stuff on Entertainment Tonight and Access Hollywood. Just all the sitcoms, the Osbournes, everything from that to, American Idol to whatever. I've, just most shows, all the crime shows, CSIs and all those shows I've had stuff in, and just tons, hundreds of TV shows. So that money is great. It just always kind of comes in, and it's kind of like my mailbox money and keeps me going. And I still write a lot of stuff for that. This year I wrote for Warner Chappell and for Universal for their TV divisions. I just gave them a bunch more pop country stuff, and I just did 3 old alternative garage band, kind of metal garage stuff that's out these days. Bands like the Heavy and Black Angels and all that.
So do you provide them with a library of music, and then you just never know where it's going to pop up?
Well, that most of the time, that's what it is. They just tell me, hey, we need 5 dance songs, or we need some Motown songs, or we need some metal, or we need, and I can do, since I program and I do play guitar and keys and all that, I can, and drums you can bash out in drum machines, or I've got friends that'll just come over and pound it out for me in my studio. But yeah, I just do tons of that stuff where, and then I just get my statement and go, oh wow, I got used on this or that, and it's fun.
So that takes you up till 2000-ish, And was that around the time for the Winger reunion?
Well, I'd done. It was like towards the end, right before 2000. I had done a couple more Alice things. As a matter of fact, I was usually Alice's keyboard player, but then he called me. I think it was in like '98 or '99. I did a tour of South America as his guitar player. And Derek Serenian played keys. So that was fun. Me and Steph Burns, and actually me and Steph grew up together as little kids. Our dads taught in the Diablo School District together. So that was really fun to get to spend time with Steph. And then I also hooked up at that time with John Waite and did some scattered dates with him, which was fun. And then I did a 1 month stint with Tommy Shaw for his solo thing. It was me and Michael Cardelloni and Tommy and a bass player who I just keep forgetting his name. It's been so long since I've seen him. But we just did 1 quick month on the road, opening for Peter Frampton and Leonard Skinner. So that was really fun.
It sounds like I had a pretty good balance there between all the studio work for TV, and then you could go off and go on tour for a month.
Yeah, I was at the time. And about 2000, I think, is when I got that main title. And then shortly after, Kip called me and just said, hey, Poison wants us to go. And by then, I mean, Winger had been broken up. No one had been playing. And Kip called me and he just said, hey, Poison called and they want us to open for them and Cinderella. But they want, the original lineup. But we don't want to leave John out, and he's like, we were thinking maybe all 5 of us could do it. And I'm like, cool, that'd be really fun. Because, John can play guitar, keys, and he sings his butt off, and he's just the best guy. So, the 5 of us went out and did that for 2 months, with no label and no management. And, we just kind of open and ride the bus and eat catering and have fun. It was a blast. And then that was it. I left again, and by then I had matter of fact, we did our rehearsals in Nashville because the band lived all scattered all over the U.S. I mean, I was in L.A., Kip was in New Mexico, Rod was in Long Island, Rev was in Pittsburgh, and John was in Memphis. So we didn't know where to rehearse for that tour. So our old road manager, Rick Fulner, said, why don't you guys come to Nashville? I can put most of you up at my house. I've got a great place to rehearse. And then you're 200 miles from the first gig. You can just jump on the bus and go to Tupelo, Mississippi. And we're like, well, that makes sense. So we all flew out here and got our equipment here. And we were here for 2 weeks. And in that 2 weeks, I was writing with all kinds of people. And I got set up to write a song with Jody Messina. And I was just like, wow, man, this is cool. So after the tour, I just told everybody, you guys, I think I'm just going to go to Nashville and I'm going to be a writer, which is what I've always wanted to do. So, and they kept, I don't remember if they kept it going or they stopped for a while and then put it back together. But, at some point they just started being out there playing again. And I had just decided I was hanging up the touring days, which I did for 10 years up until 2 years ago when Tom Keifer called me out of the blue going, hey man, we need a keyboard player and you're the guy. So if you want it, it's yours. And I had just been kind of telling, my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, that I was like, man, it'd be really fun to go out and do some shows again. It's been a long time. But I said, I can't even imagine who I would, I'm not going to go join up with a bunch of young kids or a bunch of idiots or, I was thinking, God, it would just have to be the right thing. And I was, into my mind, I was going, that'll never happen. And, but Tom called and I was, and I knew those guys very well and always liked them a lot. I was just like, God, that's a no-brainer. So I joined up and we had a great 8 weeks on the road. And at the end, he pulled me aside and just said, hey, the guys don't know yet, but I'm releasing a solo record and I'm going to put a new band together and I'd like you to be in it. And I said, wow, cool. So that started that. So that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years, that. And, of course, then Winger called and said, hey, it's our 25th. Let's do some shows. And that led to us going into Japan. And we're just actually all just having a lot of fun playing together. I mean, this last show in Chicago was just a blast. We all had a great time. And so I've been doing those things. And I also have a for fun band that we started here about 5 years ago called The Big Rock Show. And it's just an 80s cover band. And we decided to put it together here in town. And because we have this place called 12th and Porter that has unbelievable sound and lights. I mean, their lighting system's incredible. And we thought, let's just put a big rock show together and play all the 80s hits and just do it for free and just have fun. Invite all our friends and make it a party. And so we did one, and it just went over like crazy. We packed this place. And so the club was like, anytime you guys want to do that, we are in, and they said, we'll give you as much beer as you want to drink and all that, and we'll give you free lights and sound, because they used to charge if you used their big over-the-top lighting system. It used to be $500, and they said, look, we'll give you the lights for free. You guys can just not charge, so, we don't have to worry about guest list. So we just started doing it, and it just became this thing in Nashville that everybody knew about, and everybody was like, hey, when's the next big rock show? And so one day we were doing it, and Doc McGee came down. And Doc afterwards came back, and he's like, oh, my God, you guys are amazing. He goes, I want you on the Kiss Cruise. And we're like, are you serious? Would people like us? He's like, you guys will go over huge on that boat. So he goes, it's our first one. And so we're like, all right. And so we went out with him. He goes, hey, we'll pay you good. And so we went and did it. And he was right. I mean, it went over. This band just has this weird thing. Everywhere we go, everyone just loves something about it. I mean, it's a great band. And I mean, our two singers just do, like our bass player sings all the AC/DC and the, Dio and all that kind of stuff. And then our other singer sings all the White Snake and Def Leppard and all that. But it's just this weird thing. I've never seen anything like it. So at the end of the cruise, Sixth Man pulled us in a room, and they're like, oh, my God, the whole boat loves you guys. We want you back for next year's Kiss. We want you for, Kid Rock next year. I'm like, all right. So now it's 4 years later, and we've done every Kiss cruise. And matter of fact, they just went while I was in Japan. Doc and them pulled them out. They played out in Las Vegas when Kiss did their residency there. The Big Rock Show played at the Joint, where when they were done with the Kiss thing, they would go through and see the Big Rock Show in the next room. So it's been crazy. And from all the cruises we're doing, we're getting CEOs and all that inviting us now. We might be doing something like in Vail in February. We've played in Toledo. We've played in Michigan. We're playing all over Georgia. It's just spiraling out of control. And I mean, it's literally just this thing we were just doing for fun,
Yeah, it's amazing because you're getting a lot of these bands. Like there's a couple in Vegas of these, retro 80s. Steel Panther have gone huge with it.
Right.
It seems like the fans of 80s music are now in their 40s and a little older and ready to start kind of revisit their youth a little bit.
I guess, man, because I'll tell you, and I mean, the other side of it is it's a very sociable band. I mean, we get out, we play our set, and then we go jump off the stage and just hang out with everybody on the boat, and just it's a big party.
Sure.
Where some of the bands play and just run back to their rooms. We have made a lot of friends on those boats, and it's turned into a lot of gigs for us, but that seems to be the biggest thing. Everybody's like, oh my God, you guys are the funnest band ever. And we, just have people that just love it. So it's fun. It's been kind of one more spectrum to the live thing that I've been doing, and it's kind of fun. Although this year it became really difficult to juggle all the bands. Literally this last month, I had one thing where I got off the road. I had one day, then I had to fly to Phoenix and LA with Tom Keifer, fly back for one day, fly to Miami, jump on the cruise with the Big Rock Show, fly back for one day and start like 11-hour days rehearsing with Winger, and then back to LA, then Hawaii, Japan. By the time I got to Japan, I was ready to fall on my face, So I kind of took on a little too much this year, and I mean, depending on, how much Tom books this next year, I might have to kind of, I have a friend that's taken my place in the Big Rock Show now whenever I can't do it, and I might have to, let him have some more gigs next year because I really killed myself at the end here.
And you're still probably working on writing songs with other artists while you're doing it too.
Well, right now I've stopped lately. It
really,
got to the point this last half a year I haven't done, other than the 3 little garage things I did for Warner, which I had a couple weeks off about 2 months ago. I bashed those out. But other than that, I haven't gotten much writing in. my schedule was too crazy towards the end of this year. But, and I'm saying that in a good way. I mean, but I am looking forward. Like now, I'm off. I'm off probably really till March. So I have some good time off now, and I am looking really forward to in a couple of weeks once I'm rested to start sitting in my studio again and cranking some stuff out.
And the other cruise you did was the Monsters of Rock show, because I saw you there with both bands.
Yeah. This year I alternated between Cinderella and Winger. So it's been crazy. I mean, and that was semi-hard because I had to relearn, because with Tom on the solo thing, we had taken some of the Cinderella things and we had changed them up a little bit. So I had to go back and kind of relearn how to do it the other way and relearn all the old ones that we weren't playing on the Tom, and while at the same time learning a ton of Winger stuff. And it's been a lot of learning songs this year. Because every time we do a cruise with a big rock show, we try and learn a ton of new stuff. And then this is the most Winger stuff any of us Winger guys have learned. We were all just mentally basket cases. Matter of fact, we were all just talking in Chicago because we got there. We only had 6 days there. We were just recovering, and then we flew back, and we've only had like a week off, and then we did, Green Bay and the Chicago show. And this is the worst jet lag I've ever had. And I was like, are any of you guys jet lagged? And they're all five of them like, oh my God, are you kidding? Like, none of us have been sleeping, including last night. I woke up at, 4:00 in the morning and I was just up. I mean, so.
Did you ever think when you moved to Nashville to focus on songwriting that you'd ever be touring this extensively again?
No, I honestly didn't think I was going to be back on the road. And I didn't even think I was going to be doing it when I said yes to Tom. I thought I'd go out and play 8 weeks and go, wow, that was really fun. And that was going to be it. But it just opened the floodgates. All of a sudden I just started getting all these offers, and, I actually got just another very big offer to audition for something, which I'll tell you off the record another time, but because I just said no. And it was a very hard decision, but I'll tell you at another time. But, I've gotten to where I'm like, man, I need to just kind of not have way too many things happening. And I felt like it was just, it would have meant I'd be right back in because the audition's in a few days. And I was like, no, I cannot do this. So anyway, the way it goes.
Well, no rest for the wicked.
I guess, believe me, I'm, very grateful, and, it's amazing in the condition the music business is in that somehow me and a lot of these guys have this much work happening right now, and glad to be able to take advantage of it. Hopefully next year I'll just do it in a little more of a sane way. I'm really good at working really hard, but I'm not great at multitasking, and it just became very difficult juggling the logistics sometimes, even of just the equipment. And when I'd get off a bus and I'd have to be on planes, and like, how was I going to get these keys and that guitar and this amp? And it started to be a real juggling act for a while here towards the end here. And I just, next year I want to just kind of, I'm hoping that Tom Keifer and them, his booking agent has said, you guys are going to be really busy next year. So that's what I like when I have one project that I can just go, this is it, and let's do it. And, sink my teeth into it.
That was Paul Taylor. I hope you liked it. For everything to Double Stop, go to thedoublestoppodcast.com. And remember, subscribe to the show so you don't miss any episodes. I'll be back next Monday with another new interview.